Plato. Socrates taught Plato, among others. Socrates had many pupils. One of the most remembered one was Plato. Plato taught Aristotle, and while I'm at it, Aristotle taught Alexander the Great. Which may explain why their philosophy spread over the Western world. Hi. Plato is famous for several quotes, and one quote he's most famous for is, "Do as I say, but don't do as I do." Maybe because Plato realized his moral failings, whatever. And hey, I had to use that quote myself when I was teaching 10-year-olds how to write, trying to teach young students penmanship. You might know I have very poor penmanship, so I tell them now, hey, do as I say, but don't do as I do. And my wife tells me that her father used to say that all the time to his children, do as I say, but don't do as I do. And she didn't realize till I told her that the quote came from Plato. Anyway, Plato wrote a lot, unlike Socrates. A lot of his writings have come down to us. Like Socrates, he dealt with the issue of government, and he believed the ideal government was a republic. Now, I want to say about government. How we should govern ourselves or be governed is an issue that mankind has not solved. And there are persons who will say the best government is about one person who can make decisions or one capable person. Every government that mankind has tried has some kind of a problem. But Plato believed the best form of government was a republic. The difference between a republic and a democracy is in a republic, a select few have the rule. You try to pick the wisest and supposedly the best and send them to the government seat, and they do the ruling for you. Select few. What we have in our country is a republican form of government, where that we elect representatives and senators and send them to Washington, and they make the laws for us, they make our decisions for us, because it would seem almost impossible for all 300 million Americans to have input and meet in one city and have their voice heard. Now, I say that tongue-in-cheek because thanks to the invention of the computer, the time may soon come when every American over the age of 18 might be able to have input, and we become more democratic than ever. But that's the Republican government might go out the window again, and that's something else. Anyway, Plato believed in a republic. He was fascinated with the question of reality. What is real and what is not? He developed a concept that the universe that we live in, the world of our senses, is but a shadow of the real world. The real world is the ideal world. His philosophy is sometimes called idealism. That in the real world, clothes would never grow old. In the real world, your car would always be new. It would always be new, would never require an oil change, never get a scratch. There would be no law of thermodynamics. Everything would be new and stay new. This was his idea of reality. That this world we're living in was but a shadow. Now, I want to state before you think this sounds like Christianity, it had one serious difference. In that the world, Plato believing, by his belief that the world we lived in was inferior but a shadow, he guaranteed that his people, his followers, would never develop the technology that we enjoy today. Because in his mind, the universe was not regular enough and orderly enough to bring forth the kind of technology we have today, whether you can put 1 million transistors together. If you put them together just like these manufacturers did, the device you have would do the same thing this device does. Again, we just assume that. Plato did not understand that his philosophy was actually directing people away from the technology that was to come when his ideas were somewhat questioned. But he believed that you could know the ideal by training your mind. And with proper mental training, you could get yourself into a state of perceiving the world not as it is, but as it might be or could be. Plato set up a school in Athens known as the Academy, of which his star pupil was Aristotle. The word academy, of course, means private school, not as opposed to a government school. So this school is a government school and not an academy. Now, something else I want to state about Plato. He went to Egypt, as did possibly so many of the great Greeks. And while in Egypt, he was told by the Egyptian scribes, they might have been priests, philosophers, whatever you call them, he was told that, hey, you Greeks have a very short memory. You don't know that you were the people who defeated the armies of Atlantis. So that he was told that Atlantis lay just somewhere beyond the Pillars of Hercules, in other words, out in what is today the Atlantic Ocean. And the Atlanteans were about to take over the earth. They were a race of giants founded by the gods Atlas. Some accounts say Atlas, and some accounts say Poseidon. But they were in the process of taking over the earth. But the Greeks, with their bravery, went out, fought against them, stopped them. And shortly after the Greeks had stopped them, the city of Atlantis, or land Atlantis, was overrun by a big, huge tidal wave and fell into the sea, never to be heard from again. Each of you can decide for yourself. The land of Atlantis, though, has been searched for high and low, and some people believe they found it. Most recently, someone claimed that he could detect in Spain that by sending sonar waves, he found some straight lines at right angles, and right angles and straight lines do not occur in nature. But then if you go to the website that deals with this, you'll find that other person said, no, it's all fake, it's all a hoax. The straight lines and right angles that he found supposedly do not exist there.
What about the, I've seen I just read it online, but I've seen things online about
I've seen them too.
Well, no,
Yeah. In other words, if you go online and get somebody that says, yeah, we found it, if you look at another website, they'll say, no, we haven't.
I'm saying structures found underwater,
Oh, no, there's, okay, all kinds of cities that have sunk underwater, all kinds. Pyramids have been found, and in Alexandria, Egypt, a lot of Alexandria has sunk underwater. We don't even have a record of when it happened. Off the Persian Gulf, there's a lot of underwater cities. Really, and off the coast of Japan, there's underwater even in North America, off the coast of North America. A lot of underwater structures, where apparently a continental shelf either broke off or the oceans rose up somehow and sunk a whole lot of things that are still sunk, which might give some credence to the story. Again, you can make up your mind for yourself what you believe. There have been a lot of books written about it, a lot of movies. Atlantis is figured in a whole lot of folklore, and hopes that someday we might find it. Anyway, the Atlantic Ocean was named after Atlantis, the city of Atlanta, nearby, named after the same phenomenon. All right. Plato classified people according to three classes, of which he looked on the lowest class of being the people who were ruled by desire. They'd be the farmers, the tradespeople, the farmers. In other words, the masses. He said the people who were ruled by courage, wisdom, they were the philosophers and the soldiers, and they were the better of people, and the rest of us were ruled by desire. We were the producers. Now, he's also well known for believing that men and women could associate as equals. And unlike other people of his day, he believed that women and men were nearly equal. He believed that women could even function in politics. He also believed that men and women could associate together as friends without becoming lovers, and from thence we get the word platonic. You might say, well, we're just platonic friends. In other words, we're not romantically We don't have any romantic attachment to each other, but we like each other as friends only. The word, again, comes from Plato. Now, on the issue of homosexuality, there's a progression, folk, from Socrates to Aristotle. Socrates believed it was wrong and fought it. He apparently had the temptations and might have overcome it. To Plato, he said, hey, it's okay. And then to Aristotle, who didn't even deal with the issue anymore. To Aristotle, it wasn't even a matter of whether or not it was okay, it just wasn't even an issue. You know, there's a progression. Now, there was another progression with these three men in a different direction. From the spiritual to the mundane. Socrates has been called a free thinker. But folk, he was one of the most spiritually minded men who ever lived. I mean, who claimed to have frequent and regular contact with a demon. Plato was very, believing in an upper story level of existence, an otherworldly level of existence. Then Aristotle, he abandoned almost all spirituality and materialism. There's a famous painting made in the Middle Ages about Plato arguing with Aristotle. Plato has his hand pointed upward toward heaven. That's where the solution lies. Aristotle has his finger pointed down toward the ground, the earth. That's where the solution lies with the earth. And they're arguing vehemently, the one of them with his hand in the sky, the other one with his hand down. Each arguing the point as to what constitutes reality or what constitutes the best. But there's a progression from spiritual to material. Now, it represents the Greek thought, because Greek thought during the time that these three men lived went from more and more materialism to less and less spirituality. Now, that was true up to a point. Fast forward about 100 years, you'll find the Greeks becoming the most spiritually minded people who ever were. And I don't mean by that they embraced Christianity. This is before Christianity. They became unbelievers and atheistic during this period of time and a little bit later. And as is the case of almost all, I mean, I've seen myself, parents who are religiously indifferent oftentimes will have children who are very intensely, almost fanatically spiritually minded. The Greeks went through the same thing.